everyone, this is Liz Easton, and I wanted to take a quick second to invite you to listen in to the PC Book Club. Wait, I need to start again. Hi, everyone. This is Liz Easton, and I wanted to take a quick second to invite you to listen to the PC Book Club, aka PCBC. Every so often, Ricardo Avila and I chat about the books that you should be reading right now. It's just like sitting on your own private book club discussion, only there's probably slightly more references to true crime and Charles Dickens. I did not write this.
We may have to re-record that anyway, because I think you just said it's just like sitting on your own private book club.
She did. That was great. Sitting on a book club. Sitting on a private book club. That's pretty racy. Sorry.
Should I try again? It's just like sitting in on your own private book club discussion, only there's probably slightly more references to true crime and Charles Dickens. So if you're looking for the class with an occasional dose of the sass, then check out the PC Book Club right here on the Popping Collars feed. Class and sass.
Love it.
I was praying to the Lord for some fun, but I guess He
Hello, everyone. My name's Greg Knight. I like watching, thinking about, and talking about movies. One of the great things about starting your own podcast is that there are some days when you actually get to talk to the creators of those movies. This is one of those days. This month, I got the chance to talk to DJ Caruso, the director of a new film called Mary. Letterboxd.com will tell you Mary conceives a child miraculously, angering King Herod, who seeks to kill the newborn, fearing he'll threaten his power. Mary is forced into hiding with her infant son. What I'll tell you is that this is a sometimes wild retelling of the story of Mary from the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, mixed with Orthodox mythology and modern movie magic. In short, it's of a piece with the biblical epics of the past, dating all the way back to DeMille's King of Kings, with a blending of just enough religiosity so as not to offend Christian hall monitors, and just enough camp to keep the watcher on their toes as to what could happen next. And a quick new feature to these intros, because a lot of you have been asking for background on our guests. DJ Caruso got his start directing action-oriented television back in the 90s and 2000s. His breakout film was probably Disturbia, featuring Shia LaBeouf. He's pretty well kept to the action genre most of his career, with films like I Am Number 4, Eagle Eye, and XXX The Return of Xander Cage. This latest offering, Mary, is through Netflix. So what happens when you mix a nativity story with a Hollywood action movie and a dash of Anthony Hopkins? Find out as I keep things under the stole with DJ Caruso. But before we chat, here's a trailer for the film.
I don't know why, but I was chosen for this.
Mary, your birth was a gift for your mother and I. It was a miracle. But in exchange, I made a promise.
We have been waiting.
Great Herod, the prophecy speaks of the coming Messiah.
What need have we of a Messiah? Let it be understood. I am your king.
Child.
You are far more powerful than words, child. I don't understand how it is your will that I should marry this perfect stranger.
You are to have a son.
But that's not possible.
All things are possible. You've laid with a man.
No, Father, I need you.
You'll be put to death.
I'm gonna bring this child into the world with love. I don't care what they say. I will love you as best as I can.
This Messiah, is he real? Has he been born? Where is he? Tell me! Where is he?
Love would cost you dearly. It will pierce your heart. But in the end, love will save the world.
And I always start with the same question. My audience is getting bored with me, but I love it because I feel like it's a great way to get to know you and to get to know your story a little bit. Mm-hmm. So what was the moment in your life or the event that happened to you that made you think, this is what I want to do? I want to make movies. I want to create art.
Well, it's probably not one specific moment, but I will tell you that my father was a hairdresser, kind of a blue collar family in Norwalk, Connecticut. And on Mondays, hairdressers don't work. Like their salons are closed. They do all their bills. They take all their stuff. And so every Monday, just about every Monday from the time I could remember being 4 all the way into high school, my father and I saw movies.
Oh,
so
wow.
We saw movies together, and he was a pretty tough, Italian dad. But like when I see, we'd be watching a movie, I look over, and I see a little tear come down his cheek, and I'd be like, "Wow, this is." Then in retrospect, I look back, and now I know this was his escape, right? Yeah. This was his escape, and this was what it was. So we saw movies. I was seeing Saturday Night Fever when I was 11, and movies I shouldn't see. My mom would say, "What did you take him to?" And I'd say, but I just got so immersed in it that I knew I wanted to do. By the time I got to high school, I knew I wanted to be involved in making movies. I didn't know it was directing. I just knew I wanted to be involved in making movies. And so and it's funny, people always talk about their dreams. This was kind of something I didn't really share.
Yeah.
Because it's like when you're in Norwalk, Connecticut, your boys are your boys. And I just kind of kept it in. And then finally, when it got to high school in 10th grade and I started looking at schools on the West Coast, I was a pretty good tennis player. And got some offers for scholarships like on the East Coast, but nothing on the West Coast. Because back then, in 1983, there was none of this internet, whatever the heck it was. And so I ended up going to UCLA, USC, and Pepperdine and looking at the schools and looking at their film schools. And Pepperdine was so small that the tennis coach told me, you can grab a camera your first day here and start shooting whatever you want to shoot. And so I ended up going to Pepperdine, and that kind of started me. But to answer your question, I think it was like, through all of these years and experiencing these movies and seeing it through my father and seeing the magic of cinema, like I remember one of the moments for me was, we'd see like the Planet of the Apes, but then we saw Mean Streets, right?
Yeah.
And then I saw Mean Streets and I was like, oh, if a movie doesn't have to be such a spectacle. It could be about my dad and his friends. Mm-hmm. And there's a story in that. So I think I remember seeing Mean Streets when I was way too young, but also going, oh, okay, so this could be cinema as well. And so cumulative effect of my dad, I think, is why I fell in love with the movies.
No, I totally appreciate that because there's something about, especially seeing movies when you're a little too young for the content, where you're like, oh, adults are a little messed up too. They're like kind of trying to figure things out. And especially those 70s movies, like you're talking about these sort of really grimy, gritty, like getting in there kind of movies,
Yeah.
So I can see how that could inspire you.
And it's interesting too, because like you look back and like leading men were like, Gene Hackman and Roy Scheider and like, you know what I mean? And like Charlie Bronson, and like they weren't like these perfect Hollywood guys. They were like guys, right?
Yeah.
And so it was such an interesting time. You're right. It was like the height of cinema. And then I do specifically remember, I think I was 10 years old, like what a big deal Jaws was. Like Jaws became like beyond a movie. Jaws became like an event that everybody was talking about. Like you were afraid to stick your toe in the water at the dock. You know what I mean? So like that's when you also realize like, wow, that was sort of like, and I know it's been sort of documented, but that was also a big shift in cinema, I think, because it was sort of the event movie became.
Oh yeah, it became like a theme park, going to the movies like a roller coaster ride or something.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how I got in.
Well, that's a great starting point because, gosh, especially growing up in Connecticut, you said, kind of apart from the industry, telling people that you want to become a filmmaker is kind of like telling them you want to be an astronaut or something. It's like, I'm going to walk on the moon one day. Yeah.
I do remember sharing it once with a girl who's a friend of mine, like a friend or something, and she was like, yeah, right. Like, sure. Like, yeah, good luck or whatever. Yeah, you're gonna go make movies in Hollywood. Like, okay, great. Yeah. And I do always remember that thinking, well, maybe she's right. I don't know, but I do remember getting that reaction once. Yeah.
Well, I can imagine that's a lot like, check out this segue. I can imagine that's a lot like saying that you're going to direct a biblical epic, right? Because it's like, okay, so here's a genre that's existed for almost as long as cinema history, right? 100 years.
Yeah.
So was there a particular epic or a particular story that you looked to as an inspiration for what you wanted to do with Mary?
You know what I did? I watched a lot of films, like biblical films, and whether they were modern or they were old fashioned, and there's so many in so many languages. It's crazy. Like you can literally today. So I just kind of watched the most I could, and just to kind of absorb it. And then I also what I did was, and there's been some great films made by some great filmmakers, and there's been some not so great films that are just sort of like, capitalizing on here's your story of this or that, whatever. And so, but what I did was I was like, oh, it's funny that the tropes of the genre seem to have defined themselves in like, it's the desert and it's this, and it's like, it's gritty and it's dry. And it's like, everyone's in the same costumes. You can almost like rotate the costumes from drama to drama to drama.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, how do I like infuse this with like some other visual exuberance and stuff? And so we started to look at Japanese. I said to the costume designer, I love the way like Japanese robes kind of flow, and there's something that's sort of like powerful and heroic. Can we put that into the design? So we just started to dissect it by looking at all these films and using them sort of as like, how do we get outside? Like I remember I did have a dream that Bethlehem was blue, right? So we were like, I want to paint Bethlehem blue. There's this blue city in Morocco, blah, blah, blah. So, just sort of like to say, like, what can we do? So I did study those films to learn sort of what the tropes were and see, like, how far could we push it? It's not like a full-on Baz Luhrmann, but it has elements of things that are familiar, but not quite the way you've seen them before. Because, I mean, you think about the filmmakers that have tackled it, from the modern filmmakers, Scorsese, and you got Tell and all that stuff. And it's just really interesting to see the choices that were made, and how it's easy to kind of fall into just sort of the tropes of what you think this should be.
Well, one of those choices that usually gets made about the biblical epic, and I don't want to, I have a question that I want to ask you, but I don't want to offend you. But I think that there's something there, which is that there is, if you look at DeMille, if you look at Weiler, if you look at some of the stuff that they're doing, there is built-in camp to the biblical narrative sometimes, especially when you get into the Herod story, because everyone kind of wants to play up the madness, right? The Salome, like all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, was there a point where you were making this movie that you felt like, boy, I could kind of lean into some camp elements like in this story, because that's kind of what piques people's interest when they watch the biblical epic, or I can hold back? Like,
well, yeah, it's interesting. It's good because I think there's certain sort of givens with Herod, right? And like who he was, it's evil. And, I think it's Matthew that basically talks about, the slaughtering of the innocents. And then what I did was like, there's twofold. Is like Josephus was a historian who really talked about Herod and like talked about the history of the Jews and the war and how the Romans helped him and what he was, and like what an incredible like empire builder he was. Like he was an incredible empire builder. We still have things that are still standing in the Holy Land just because of him. And so, but what I learned was like, why is he this way? And you realize that he's that way because he was the king of the Jews who wasn't really a Jew, right? So he wasn't accepted by his own people. He was trying to please the Romans. So he was always sort of overdoing everything. He overbuilt everything. So like what you're saying is like there's a camp element to like everything has to be huge. I'm going to build you the second temple that's the greatest temple of all time for your God. And look what I'm doing for you. It was like, so there's a big performance element to what Herod was about, right? But what I thought was so amazing was Sir Anthony recognized that. But he also recognized that, like, well, let me throw something in there. Like, what if his subconscious objective was that he's really looking for the Messiah, maybe not to destroy him, but to kind of see, like, what is this all about?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that little weird sort of element with Herod, underneath Herod, that Sir Anthony's playing, that yes, he's broad and vivacious and also, jealous that people, but he also has something inside of him that's a little bit more connected to maybe the subtext of the story. So that was what we really tried to do and try to bring out, so it wouldn't just be, the evil king. And why is he evil? People want to know why.
Yeah. I mean, I love the way that you describe him, because he sounds like the ultimate middle manager, right? Like never going to be able to please the higher ups, never really going to have authority over those under him. Yeah, that kind of.
Yeah. And that creates a really, really rich character level for an actor like Sir Anthony or someone to undertake, right? It's like he doesn't really have a home. This is, he's not even allowed in the temple that he built because he's not of Jewish descent. So he's not even allowed in the second temple, right? No.
So something that, even DeMille had to walk this line, with King of Kings, was this idea of, it's a biblical epic, but it's also a movie, right? You kind of have to, you kind of have to walk this tightrope between, like, look, we need to tell an entertaining story, and I get that people live lives of faith based on the characters in this movie. So it's like, how do you hold that intention when you're crafting the movie? You want to create a compelling character of Mary, but there's also like a cult of Mary that's been going for like 2,000 years, right? So like, how do you walk that line?
Well, I think you walk that line as like you sort of take, and again, it's interesting how there isn't that much in the scriptures about Mary. There's only a certain amount of, so there's only so much we know. So then it's really up to the filmmakers to say, okay, let me anchor into that sort of what I'll call like sort of the biblical fabric of our story. What's our foundation? And then how can we respectfully, cinematically lift this to a place? Okay, so Herod's sending the Roman soldiers out to get Joseph and Mary. All we've ever seen so far in the movie is they just move on a donkey. They go from one place to the other. It's like, well, you know what? They had horses back then, right? So like, how do we get movement? How do we instill? So you can take those liberties of expanding on and filling in those gaps between this sort of anchor narrative. And then, we're making a cinema, we're making a movie. We have to do the best possible job that we can. And if you're protecting your child and someone's coming after you and they're big Romans with swords, what does it feel like, right? Yeah. What does it feel like? So I need to take those moments and sort of expand on those and fill in those gaps while staying strapped into that narrative that everyone knows. And you're right. It's just, you have to elevate it. Mary basically also, even with Satan, it's sort of like that, having that around or having that voice around, it's always saying, hey, you don't have to do this. You can get out of this. It's like, just putting those things in that are like things that the temptations of not having to go through something because you're afraid or your apprehensions, like those are human elements. And then like what you're talking about is the cinematic elements that you need to have in the shot.
Yeah, and there's got to be a part of you that when you're leaning into those cinematic elements, you're kind of like, oh man, someone's gonna, like, I'm gonna hear about this on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like somebody's gonna have an opinion about this, Well, and you've got to know it, like, as you're like putting the scene together, right?
I think you do, but at the end of the day, you just try to make the best movie you can, and know that whether it's in this genre or not in this genre, there's always going to be issues with certain things. But it's just like, I just think you just do the best you can and know that, if the character and the core of who Mary is not changing. So if you kind of hang on and anchor with her and if she takes you through that, just know who she is and love her and respect her. And then, the cinematic elements are what they are, and you just got to enjoy it.
Can I talk about, I love talking to directors about actors, because I love figuring out how it is that you communicate with each other to like craft performances and stuff like that. I imagine, listen, I've never been on set with Sir Anthony Hopkins. I imagine you can pretty much just sort of set him up and let him do his thing, right? Like he's been doing this for a while.
Yeah, he's been doing it for a while. Well, the interesting thing about Sir Anthony was we had a lot of Zooms and conversations like this prior to him getting there, and sort of worked on the script. And I would send those notes to the writer, Tim, and say, Sir Anthony wants to do this. Can we try this? And so he was really involved. What I noticed, what he liked to do was do all of his prep before he got there. Character prep, this, what do I wear, wardrobe, people would come visit him. And so he did all of his prep. And you're right. When you turn on the camera and you roll with him, you don't need to say anything to him unless there's something really specific. You can just let him go. But I will tell you what's wonderful with him is he loves to play. So if there's another actor out there that's equal or can kind of go with that and roll with it, he loves to play. Because if he's done it once a certain way, he's comfortable with that and wants to see if he's missing something. So he loves to play. So he was really interesting to have that way. It was really a gift to watch him work.
So then my question would be on the other side, right? Because you have a lot of young actors that are in this. So when you're working with an actor like Noah for the Mary role, right? What you said before is totally accurate. We know very little about this person, and she's venerated very early on in sort of Jesus follower writing and stuff, right? So it's like, how do you get to a character with, like, what is it that you're looking for from her, and how do you elicit that performance from her?
Yeah, well, I think with Noah and Ito too, the young actors, is I always say, like, you sit the actor down in this chair and say, okay, you're Mary, right? Like, what is her golden key? What is her defining note? What is it that you see in her? And I always try to get them to tell me what they see or what it is in the character that they see. And so from that, we sort of then build on that and go from that sort of golden key and build on that and start to go through the structure and go through the scenes. And then when you realize it, and then to humanize this, like, you're right, because the veneration and the adoration for Mary is off the charts, right? And it's sort of like this. But what would it be like to be a young woman who's ripped from your family and given to the temple, right? And then also from the temple, then ostracized from what are those things like? And what are her apprehensions? What are her fears? What does she want? And until she accepts this sort of her mission or accepts this fiat of, like, hey, I'm with you, like, let it be me, there's a lot going on in her. And once she accepts that, she then has to overcome. It doesn't mean her life gets easier, right? So you have all these obstacles. So to kind of take Noah and to go through that, and we did a lot more rehearsing, in-person rehearsing with Noah and Ito to really find and discover their voices and who they are. And my philosophy has always been, if we can build our foundation in the rehearsals, then I am there to just kind of guide and keep you on the tracks and shape you to make sure that we're following those things. And the most beautiful thing about acting is when there's discovery within scenes, right? And so seeing those discoveries and putting those together. So, every actor, is different. Like, once Noah was locked in, man, was she locked in.
Yeah.
Ito's a little bit more exploratory, right? So, hey, what if I did this? Or okay, let's try it. Then it's like, why do you want to try that? What do you want here? Like, if you do try that, okay, you want to try that? Let's try. And so he was a little bit more exploratory. What I noticed with Noah was once she, like, kind of locked in, and man, when she did, it was just magic. So every actor is different. Like, I have 5 kids, and I always tell everyone, I have to treat them differently. Somebody goes to a different school. There's not one school of direction that fits, maybe if you're of some other level and some other, thing, maybe it does. But I always found you have to figure out how to communicate specifically with an actor and what's the key in making them work.
Yeah. And you have to make choices. Like, there's an element of your script that I really like, which is the theological idea that Mary makes a choice.
Yes.
To be the Theotokos, right? Like to be the God bearer. It's not something that's foisted on her. It's her body, her choice, right? And so that's not only a pertinent idea that exists in the world today, but it helps to sort of reframe, like, the sort of the Christmas story in general, right? Of, like, no, this is a woman that, chose to bear this and therefore chose a very particular path, right?
Yeah, no, that's really astute of you, because that is exactly right. It's like she has to make these choices. And I think when you adhere so closely to the scriptures, it's like, well, you don't want Gabriel to be guiding and making every decision that these characters make, right? So you want Gabriel to say, this is what I'm presenting you with. And even with Joachim, like, you have to make a choice. Will I do this, right? So I really wanted it to be, and that's what faith is too. It's in us. It's sort of a choice, but you have to make that choice. Can we all get to the place, like, where Mary said, let it be me, and then sort of let God guide your life? But it's a personal choice. You have to make that choice. And I think that was really key. Even Joseph is sort of like, I don't really know why I'm here, but I got to figure this out, but I'm going to do the best I can, right? To love you and to protect you and to protect that child. It's sort of, okay, that's human. It's really human. And that makes these incredibly, revered historic characters even more endearing in my book, because there's the human element to them.
Yeah, and that's where I would credit the film and just say, huge congratulations, because you're right. Like there are different ways of looking at this story and sharing this story, and I feel like, and this seems like another 30-minute conversation, and I'm entering into and like I'm getting this at the end, but it feels like sometimes faith-based movies can feel cookie cutter in the sense that, listen, we want to communicate a set of values to a certain group of people, so don't challenge, don't do weird things, just give them what it is that we know that they want that's going to sell, right? And so it's like, as an artist who's coming onto a project like this, how do you put your stamp and your story onto these things and make it feel authentic?
Well, yeah, and I think there's got to be truth. There's got to be truth behind the decisions, and the characters have to behave the way they do. I think you're right, because I think a lot of times you'll get a message movie that's really just a message movie, and it doesn't have any as much cinematic value or whatever it is. It's like, here's what it is, take it what it is, and this is what we all believe, right? It's great. I mean, there's nothing. It's different. I think we're now pushing the cinematic elements where, wow, like Mary had a choice, and when she made that choice, man, it was a rocky road. Like it was a rocky road. Like it was not easy, right? And I think that is really the key. That's the key. And I think you have to also with these sort of faith-based and all these films, you have to try to do. Why would you not try to do the best possible work you can do?
Right.
And you know what? The message, what I love about our film is there's different messages someone could take from this subjectively as they watch this movie, right? I list character, but it's not saying like boom, 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 and this is perfect. And it's the way, like it's messy, like life is messy. The way that we are today, it's a messy world, right? And you have to make these decisions. And in our film, these characters make those decisions.
It's great, man. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the movie. I really loved watching it. So this is a Netflix production. Do you have a theater run at all as part of this?
No, we don't have a theater run. We're going straight to Netflix and going all over the world. And we have a couple premieres like in some big cities, but it's going all over the world to Netflix, and I couldn't be happier.
Great. When does it hit the platform?
I believe December 6th all over the world.
Okay, fantastic. Go watch Mary. Sit around, sip your eggnog by your Yule log, and check out, A Christmas Story unlike any other. DJ, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Great to speak with you. Thank you.